right now in Wisconsin, in terms of Republicans maintaining their majority in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin state legislature, or as of, I guess, a day or two ago, was ordered by a lower court to create a new redistricting plan by this fall in their congressional districts, because it was found that they gerrymandered them to such an extent that it was unfair. Put aside race for a moment. We've had a couple of those resolved, right, in North Carolina recently by the Supreme Court. This is different. The Supreme Court yesterday put that order on hold and said, we're going to review this case. Now, the Supreme Court has a history of reviewing partisan gerrymandering. And as you know, this is the way it works out. State legislature controlled by one party or the other. If it's a census year, like following 2010, they use those numbers and they gerrymander. Back in the day, you used to say, like, you would go to a state senator and say, Bill, what do you want? Well, I need that neighborhood and I need that neighborhood because that neighborhood generally goes for me. In 2010, and we interviewed, I can't remember his name, David Dagan, was it? Not Dayan, Dagan, on his book, Rat Fucked. And it talked about how in 2010, with increases in technology, there was such hyper gerrymandering that it locked in a lot of seats across the country. David Daley. And in 2004, the court looked at this question of partisan gerrymandering. It was a 5-4 decision basically arguing that the court can't overrule gerrymandering. However, there were 4 justices, Scalia, Rehnquist, Sandra Day O'Connor, and Clarence Thomas, that agreed the court should never review a question of partisan gerrymandering. There were 4 liberal ones, Stevens, Ginsburg, Souter, and Breyer, who said that it can. There was a 5th justice, who was the swing vote, who said, well, the court can if we can ever find a way of doing it fairly. Because how can you really say that this is gerrymandered? Like, what is the definition of a district that is fair? You know, is it fair if Democrats win? Is it fair if Republicans win? How do you do that? And until that can come up, I'm going to vote on the side of those conservatives who say we shouldn't review it. And that man's name was Anthony Kennedy. Anthony Kennedy, still on that court. Many of the others I just mentioned aren't. But the lines are basically the same. And the question in the Wisconsin case is, is there basically a now developed mechanism in which to judge if a district has been gerrymandered? And there are some political scientists, and the plaintiffs are presenting this theory that they have come up with one. And it is called the efficiency. Well, here, I'll tell you what it is. It is the efficiency gap. And it was developed by Nicholas Stephanopoulos. I don't know if he's related to anybody. From the University of Chicago Law School. And Eric McGee of the Public Policy Institute of California. And what they do is they attempt to calculate the wasted votes in a district. And the way that they calculate wasted votes are the ones that don't help a party's candidate to victory. So if the Democrats draw the districts and they spread the Republican voting base among so many districts that the party lacks a viable majority in any one district, right? So you have 3 districts. One is 60% a Republican. The other 2 are 20% Republican. If you split up that 60% district so that all 3 are 40%, Republicans can never win, right? I'm simplifying, but that's basically it. Assume the rest are Democrats. Then those 40% votes in each one of those districts, they are wasted. They can never help a person win. And then the opposite is true. If you put all of the Republican, let's say you say, okay, we have a 60% Republican district, and we have 2 other districts that are 20% Republicans. We're going to move those 20% Republicans or 30% Republicans in those other districts into the 60%. So that will be almost like 100%, 90% Republican district, and we can run Democratic candidates in the other 2, and we'll win those. And they would do that if it's, let's say, a 45 to 45 type of thing. That's how you measure the efficiency gap. When there is a certain percentage of votes that are wasted, but no more than that percentage. And they have chosen the number 7%. I'll return to that in a moment. But understand, the example I just gave is Democrats doing that. And that's not the case. We have multiple occasions where over the past 15 years or so, and particularly in the past 6, where Democrats have won 60% of the vote, but only get 40% of the representatives because of the way the votes are distributed. I mean, we see this in the Electoral College, but the Electoral College was not massaged by states. I mean, that's just the way the chips fell. But you can see how you can win the majority of the votes and lose. But imagine if the states were drawn in such a way where we're going to put all the Democratic voters consciously into California. California is actually going to be the shape of California and then a very thin strip that goes across the country and encompasses New York. And that's going to be one district. And they're going to get X amount of electoral votes. And then the rest of the country is going to be another district. I mean, that's the equivalent of what's going on here. And so these political scientists have developed this theory of the efficiency gap. The one problem is how do you come up with that number? Like, what percent of wasted votes is fair? And they had an argument, I guess, in their paper that it was 8%. They have changed it to 7% in the context of their argument to the Supreme Court. And I don't know if that's enough to sway Anthony Kennedy. In fact, let me say it's probably not. And once this gets the go-ahead, once the gloves are completely off in terms of partisan redistricting, the gloves will be completely off, and Republicans control this power. So this is implicating healthcare. And I got news for you. California can have single payer, and New York State could have single payer. And that's not going to convince a congressperson, a Republican congressperson who's in Pennsylvania sitting in a district that is reliably 58, 57% Republican because of redistricting. They just aren't going to care. I mean, right now in this John Ossoff race, all you hear coming out of the pundits is like, the Republicans here are really frustrated that the Congress has yet to overturn Obamacare, that they haven't cut taxes. Right? And this is the district where, like, these are supposedly the... And so it's depressing the Republican vote. So this court case is hugely important. And again, we see the implications of Neil Gorsuch. Because if it was Merrick Garland, it wouldn't matter where Anthony Kennedy is. In fact, he'd probably join the majority because that's just the type of guy he is.
Well, or you need to get somebody on the Supreme Court who had been personally in a gerrymandered district. That's the other way to get.
That's right, exactly.
Well, that's terrible.
Or had run.
Yeah. He ran a gerrymandered district. See, I had no idea. I've learned all this stuff about Puerto Rican women as well.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos